When I was a kid, Ninja Turtles were kind of the brand that straddled the difference between playing with toys and collecting toys. It was kind of the line where I temporarily walked away from the toy hobby because, well, I wasn't a kid anymore. Luckily, I was able to get pulled back in. But looking at Turtles and the way it was sold in, well, it's no shock that an 80s property 30 years later is now becoming the dominant force in nostalgia. And there are a lot of Ninja Turtle toys out there, like more than we've ever had. I did a whole video about this not too long ago, wondering if there's almost too many companies doing Turtles, especially because quite a few of them really do overlap. You've got things like Super 7 doing their Ultimates, which aren't available at retail. There's their differentiator, but they're also based on the old toys and the toys alone. No more, no less. Versus at retail, we have toys based on the animated series from Playmates, so not based on the original toys, but based on the look from the original 1987 Ninja Turtle animated series, sold at retail to differentiate. But oddly, we also have another toy based on the animation, also sold at retail from NECA. Now, one is supposed to be in the aisle, and one's supposed to be on the collector rack. It gets confusing, and NECA has been actually doing Ninja Turtle toys for quite a long time, although this is really the first time they've expanded way beyond just the Turtles. So while they started with a comic book version of the original four Turtles, they've absolutely grown the brand and the license to the point that they are deep diving into the animated series beyond anything I thought we would ever get. And what really blows my mind is not just the character selection, but the tooling. I mean, there's a lot of tooling that's going into this line because they are essentially, well, they're creating characters that some of them only appeared in one episode, but more so they're unique. You can't take, one of, the thugs and turn it into the robot cop, or take Baxter Stockman and turn it into a, 1940s flyby hero. So huge credit for going deep in character selection, absolutely. But what blows my mind as a toy maker is how a brand that is skewed to be on the collector wall is able to produce so much tooling and so much variety. But I have some theories about that from working in the toy industry as long as I have. So one, you've noticed that these toys from NECA have absolutely creeped up into the aisle by having placement on end caps that are either facing away or into the main action figure aisle. Gets a lot more eyeballs on it and moves a lot more product when you can be as close to the action figure aisle as possible. Now, shared tooling is something almost every toy company needs to use in order to afford a variety of characters. This B sheet for Mattel, you can see in red represents the new parts, the gray represents shared parts. So showing how you can make multiple figures using the same basic buck body. Now, a lot of brands that have been successful over the years with large toy companies have been specifically because of the shared tooling. Masters of the Universe is a perfect example. There's a beast, a human, and a reptile look, and they get mixed and matched. Other times throughout toy history, and especially kind of in the mid-'80s, you had a lot of toys getting borrowed from different lines and either getting label slapped or what's called kit bashed. Now, Demolition Man figures using bodies of He-Man characters is something that is kind of cool but would never fly today. Same with all of the Superpowers figures that got reused for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, or even the fact that they brought in some Star Wars figures for that line. That's something you can get away with back in the 80s. Today, most toy lines require their own dedicated parts. And if you look at things like what Super 7 does, they do very deliberately go after brands that have a lot of reuse. He-Man, Thundercats, Turtles, there are a lot of parts that can become another character simply by redecorating them. Now, this isn't something you could just do willy-nilly. Some redecos work, others not so much. It depends on the character and the situation. But if you are a I guess you could say, well-educated brand manager and you truly understand the brand, you'll know which decos are going to be more popular and which could actually cause the whole downfall of a line by clogging pegs too much. Believe me, it happens. All right, so back to NECA's Ninja Turtle line. How in the world are they able to go beyond just the turtles and have so much tooling? I mean, it's not logical that a line that is not at mass retail in the aisle would be able to sell in the numbers high enough in order to justify that tooling. So looking at the way NECA does it, first off, you've got the turtles, the main characters, which all share tooling. I mean, that, for starters, is a great thing. One body, new heads, boom. And if you look, you'll actually see they've very deliberately done a lot of army builders that use the same tools. So while at first glance it looks like the line has almost 100% tooling for every character, when you really dive in and look, you'll see there's actually a lot more shared tooling than you realize. Now, that's not to say there aren't characters that are fully unique 100% sculpts, and that's what really kind of, well, as a toy brand manager, trips me up, because that's the most expensive part of toy making. It's the capital expense. So finding ways to justify this when you could only release characters usually once, maybe you could find a redeco to amortize the tooling, but for a line like Ninja Turtles, there's a lot of fully tooled unique characters. So NECA, being a much, much smaller toy company, is able to take advantage of this simply because they are a much smaller toy company. In fact, you could really look, and the Ninja Turtle line, TMNT, is probably the most mainstream line NECA has ever had, and that has the most character selection. So through very careful redecos or reuse, like, Bunny Rabbit, Bebop, and Rocksteady, and by finding ways to utilize the tooling and get more eyeballs on the product by having it show up on end caps, greatly exposes the number of potential customers. But it really comes down to the body types. So, as an example, this is Jersey Red, one of the punks from the Ninja Turtle line. Now, she's gotten her first ever action figure from NECA, and that's curious specifically because she doesn't have, well, I guess what you could call the typical action figure female body. In fact, I hugely applaud NECA for tooling up a non-standard human body, whether male or female. Most toy lines tend to use very standardized bodies, but not every character has the same body. A lot do, and Marvel Legends shows us that you can make almost any character using a basic buck by swapping in heads, jackets, gloves, boots, that kind of thing. It's amazing how far you could get shared tooling to stretch. But the thing is, when you're looking at other body types as toys, they tend not to sell. I mean, if different body type Barbies sold, then you'd have different type body Barbies still at market. But one of the only female figures I can think of that has a different, unique body was this Amanda Waller JLU figure I was proud to have worked on at Mattel. Of course, we had to have her compact with a General and Batman to sell. I don't know if she would have sold as a single carded figure, but still, it is rare and few between that you see, I guess you could say, non-traditional or non-standard body types, especially with female figures. All right, so what's the secret sauce? One, low overhead. I've talked about this a lot with McFarlane and some of the other companies. NECA is privately owned. They have their own money. They don't have stockholders. So they can basically do a lot of things that the larger companies like Hasbro and Mattel can't, simply because they have everything from office space to healthcare to stock dividends that they have to pay off. Without shareholders, without being a publicly traded company, your leeway and your ability to have, I guess, funding for tooling is huge. And if you look at most of the things that NECA does, they tend to all be one-off figures. Characters where there's really only one to a few figures per line. Turtles is completely different. Turtles is the first line that I've seen with NECA that has just almost an infinite number of characters, which is why they're allowed to, or able to, do loss leader pricing. Meaning, because the brand is so big and there are so many SKUs they can do, if they lose money or break even on tooling with one figure, well, they can gain that on another simply because the brand is so big. Having a huge brand at a tiny company is the secret formula. And that doesn't happen that much. All right, so let me know what you think. Can you think of other examples where a huge brand winds up at a much smaller toy company? It's very rare, but when this does happen, it's the key to unlocking a lot of tooling. Let me know what you think. Love to hear your thoughts, and as always, the best way to support this channel is to share this with others. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.